I'm fixing a hole where the rain gets in and stops my mind from wondering where it will go. I'm filling the cracks that ran through the door and kept my mind from wandering where it will go. And it really doesn't matter if I'm wrong, I'm right. Where I belong, I'm right. Where I belong, don't see the people standing there disagree and never wonder where they get past my door. Rest in peace, Cobes. I'ma really miss you, man. I'ma really miss you. No cap. I finally managed to compose myself enough to stream. And I got some notes here, so let's do it. Shall we? So, when President Mamdani comes to power and the new Nuremberg trials take place, after the firebombing of Miami, of course, I will have a list ready with all the good Jews I know about and be ready to stand trial to defend them. You know, non-Wahhabist Muslims, that's Muslims not propagated with extremist fundamentalist Islam that originated in Saudi Arabia only like 30, 40, 50 years ago after major funding from Britain and the US. Now, it was always nascent. Wahhab is older than 30 or 40, but it was always nascent. And it's almost kind of like how Manifest Destiny was based out of Washingtonist ideals, but it itself was seen as too far for Washington himself, who was a better man than a lot of the people that came to power after Martin Van Buren, essentially. You see, people get it really, really, really twisted. They think Andrew Jackson is the worst American president in the early years, but in reality, it's actually Martin Van Buren, who did everything wrong and nothing right, and had no aura, swag, or morality to him. Andrew Jackson had a warped, twisted sense of morality, but he still had morality. And what's interesting is the Trail of Tears that is often aligned with Andrew Jackson actually started, well, actually, it was like 80% done by Martin Van Buren. It was started by him, and that's exactly why he gets that rap. But it was Martin Van Buren who actually initiated a vast majority of the ethnic cleansing of the Native Americans. Which wasn't right at the end of the day. And many of our founding fathers would also agree, but the banks that Andrew Jackson was terrified of, that Martin Van Buren let into the country with the country on a silver platter, they're the ones who really pushed for the total ethnic cleansing of the Native American populace. People that could have lived alongside Americans very easily, and did for a very long time, actually. Rumors of their hatred towards Americans were greatly exaggerated, but they own the land. So if you kill them and steal it from them, then you own the land. And what do banks do? They've done this constantly. In fact, Israel's nothing special, really. It's a continuation of, like, essentially Dresden, what happened to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's a continuation of what the Ottoman Empire did to Bedouins and Kurds all over the place. It's just a continuation of the way that Satan has always weaponized people's greed in order to drag humanity further and further down, which, according to the lore, Satan despises humans, and the creation of humans was actually one of the things that caused the angels to fall. According to the lore, the deep lore, Satan was very, very jealous that God would create something like the angels, but also like clay, and that amphibian nature of dust and immortal soul really inflamed him and enraged him. It's a good theory. I think that's a good theory. And the Wahhabists, to get back on that, are far more adherent to the sort of extremist ideology that Satan propagates through the world, but the covenant of God that was found in Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and Moses. There is tons of Muslims throughout history, and still are tons of Muslims that believe in this. Many of those Muslims believing in that far more than the secular government of Israel. In fact, I would say a vast majority of Muslims believe in Abrahamic ideology far more than a vast majority of the Likud government, if not basically all of the Likud government. And whatever the hell Zionists have been doing in the last 10 years is not in line with Moses' laws and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Sacrificing their own children in these wars is not what Abraham would have done in any way, shape, or form. Killing innocent people, unarmed civilians, and blaming Hamas when everybody sees it because people have phones now. It isn't stuff that you could do 200, 300, 400 years ago before recording equipment. We can see it now. People can check the metadata. People can find out that this is legitimate. And people are way more intelligent thanks to the dawn of the internet. In fact, people were always more intelligent than propaganda would have you feel. And yeah, Israel is definitely losing control of the propaganda war. That's why I believe mass censorship is incoming in the next couple of months. Mass censorship. And by the next anniversary of October 7th, there's going to be absolutely horrific things that have happened to the Gazans. And it's already happening in the West Bank. So expect that for the next 4 or 5 years. The West Bank is significantly larger than Gaza. But I already have seen videos of them just completely like murdering people, bulldozing olive groves, taking deconstruction equipment, what they call construction equipment to houses, and setting up new settlements in the West Bank where people lived. So expect that because it's coming. ISIS and Likud Zionism aren't just essentially synonymous. They're literally the exact same faction. And the biggest losers are the spiritual world. But there are also Christians, most of whom actually are Mormon or evangelical, who actually believe that continuing to fund both of these factions will lead to some just apocalypse. They'll force God's hand that will bring Christ back. The reality is Christ never left. That's the reality. Christ never left. Every human being has always had to prepare themselves for their own personal revelation, their own personal apocalypse. And the body and the life everlasting of the soul, they've always had to prepare for that. And I think the book of Revelation is highly suspect. It's why it doesn't rhyme with the rest of the Bible. Throughout the entirety of the Bible, it is completely on its own. And it's influenced heavily by psychedelics, is a very, very well trot out hypothesis about this. So much so that it is effectively a working theory that John of Patmos wasn't himself when he was writing a lot of this. And if somebody is writing stuff by themselves, unlike in the Gospels, it can't be checked out. The people that exiled him to the island likely adulterated his works heavily, if not him saying whatever he could or needed to say in order to get out of his exile. And people often call Thomas like a heretical apostle. Thomas the Doubter, they call him. The Book of Thomas is considered Gnostic heresy and apostasy. And there's a reason for that, because even though when they met Christ, they may have been different and better men, people still have the free choice to fall at any given time, right? And that's why we can't just worship every single person that touched the hem of Christ's garments, which is a very valid Protestant point, an extremely valid Protestant point, in fact. And it is what it is. I don't know for sure. I'm speculating, I'm talking, and if you get upset, you should probably look more into that to find out what's exactly making you upset. Because I'm just speculating. I'm not saying anything's one way or the other. And also, the book of Revelation is filled with a mirrored theology of the Jewish Messiah who, unlike Christ, comes to bring violence, wrath, fire, to a third of his father's creation, and it's clutched on to, you notice, by the biggest grifters in Christianity. In fact, I don't think I could ever trust somebody speaking from the pulpit with a pocket square. Turns out that's Satan. Nick Fuente's going full mask off about his support for Kamala Harris is kind of funny, especially given all the crap he talks about white people. I mean, yeah, gropers are black and brown. But that doesn't mean that you have to hate white people. Oh, no, white people are feminists and, oh, they support America and then America supports Israel. How dare they? Like every single race who's greedy and stupid won't end up succumbing to the same exact trap. Whether it's Israel, whether it's a new country in the future, you know, it's the way that Satan works. Learn it, and you will not go astray in your life. Do your studies. That's what a lot of Catholics are supposed to be about. Good studies. They're the Christians that read the most. More than Orthodox, more than Protestants. But, you know, you have people like Nick Fuentes who are there specifically to espouse divisive and hateful rhetoric, despite claiming Christianity, and that's exactly what it's for. It's to, it's like a false flag, you know. It's to set up the public perception of Christianity as a negative, as well as entrap tons of people, just like Nick Fuentes entrapped tons of people during January 6th, to literally entrap tons of young men in bad, self-alienating ideologies. And that's also how gangs work, interestingly enough. So just gotta point that out there, you know. I know it's really worn out to talk about Fuentes at all in the year of our Lord 2025, but what it has to be said, you know. Some people just don't get it. And regardless of Fuentes himself, this is an important lesson to learn for any fake Christian who comes about afterwards, because there's going to be many, just like there are false Jews who are coming about right now. Learn it. Because they are hiding behind their religion and using the religious brothers as a human shield. Good people who would die for any human being. They are using them as a human shield. Remember this. Remember this. And also remember the projection fallacy, because it is the most fundamental part of all human psychology. The person most likely to perfectly outline their own crimes is themselves when they try to project it onto somebody else. Keep that in mind, please. This is the most important thing that psychology has to offer us, is the concept of projection. And what's happening under the surface? Why, they're molesting children, usually male, the hordes of immigrants that they're letting in, so-called based Republicans. The deep state monoparty loves putting these so-called based Republicans in power. And after salivating at the thoughts of waging wars with the countries these immigrants come from for decades and decades to induce this very effect. Interestingly enough, the deep state monoparty Democrats actually like to molest little girls as opposed to boys. Think Anthony Weiner. This isn't just some random deductive observation like a lot of the stuff that I say on this show. This is actually statistically proven to be one of the only delineating factors of the two parties. That and the outward expression of religion versus secularism on the right and the left. However, it is incredibly embarrassing to see the Trump administration bail out and run cover for the Israeli cybersecurity head, Tony Artyom Alexandrovich, who was arrested in Las Vegas after a child sex trafficking sting operation, promptly turned over to the Israelis after a $10,000 bond was posted for an internal investigation. Those internal investigations never yield anything. It's like a police department murdering somebody and then saying, oh, we got it. We're going to investigate ourselves. Yeah, right. There might be a slap on the wrist for the officer involved, but nobody's going to be charged with any crime with an internal investigation. You always have to have an unbiased check and balance on the outside in order to actually ensure real justice. And that has to be just and balanced. Fair and balanced, as Fox News like to say. Yeah. Although it was very funny watching Trump bust in John Bolton's door. Oh man, I live for that. And that's the exact reason why I voted for him this time. Like, no cap. Like, he straight up put John Bolton in a high position of power, and he almost gave us World War III during the first Trump administration. And now, oh man, he's so mad. He is so upset. He's in such a worse position, and I just absolutely love that. I love that. As I've stated before, about 1 out of every 200 people in Israel are sex offenders, many of whom are fleeing from countries all around the world to find refuge within the borders of Netanyahu's Israel. It makes it incredibly embarrassing to be a Trump supporter when stuff like that happens. And at the moment, I genuinely don't understand how he doesn't have the common sense not to burn this Ukrainian pilpul on the public pyre in order to send a message that he actually hates the Epstein shit. And even if he's entirely incapable of releasing the list on his own, this one thing could have swayed favor back towards him immensely. Instead, it's blowing up and going viral all over the internet. Still, it's all one big warding experience. It's a learning experience, excuse me. For the living anyways. It's a nightmare for those caught up in these wide circles of abuse, like basically all of the Palestinians alive right now, inside of the Holy Land. Which is turning very, very unholy at this rate. For instance, after hearing Likudnik freaks talk about how accurately depicting the mass starvation of the concentration camps and tent cities the Israelis have herded Palestinians from their homes into on threat of death is blood libel similar to that of the Middle Ages, I have once again come to believe that there were far less pogroms, far less actual blood libels, and far less discrimination towards ethnically Jewish people than our, fake history books would say. And if any actually took place, they were likely a concerted effort to displace and steal land meted out by the government at the behest of landlords and banks, and then occupied by farmers who would then go on to grow food on the displaced Jewish lands for military use. This thing that I talk about that happens all the time. It's true. It does happen all the time. Now, that's something that sounds believable. Anarcho-capitalism is probably the most destructive and disgusting political ideology I've seen so far, mainly because I can't even see a real application of anarcho-communism, right? It's just not there. It doesn't exist. ANCAPs represent a complete and total extraction of all the world's resources, and they sit atop a capitalist system by which, granting massive individual freedom, they are allowed to abuse it, usually the children of people who created real things. And what they do is they genuinely severely upset the renewable resources like water, wood, and food in the process. You see, if you don't know, if you haven't heard recently, water is not a finite resource. It gathers in the air, it's excreted from our body, it's excreted in our pee, it gathers in the air, it rains back down. Trees catch it in their root systems. They use what they need, and then they store stuff deep underground for later. Those are how aquifers are created. When you completely and utterly destroy the woods and then drain and poison the aquifers, that is actually how you get Dune World. And that is what anarcho-capitalism really is looking to produce. What makes it particularly disgusting is the fact that it's in service of nothing that lasts. It's in service to the liberal conceptualization of the atomized self, which, in the realm of politics, is a red herring. So as a political ideology, it is a red herring. But people genuinely do believe it, and they use it as an excuse for the worst behavior. It benefits the hedonistic glutton as they raise their children to be masochistic freaks. We've all seen this play out again and again. This is why politicians' children end up growing up to be Woodstock and Burning Man orgy goers. And there is no generation, only depravity. Regular capitalism can at least pass down business opportunity and businesses that serve a community and will in turn serve the capitalists' generations. But anarcho-capitalism has shown itself to dissolve businesses for temporary liquidity the same as it does with the Earth's resources. Note this, please. At least the communists on the left and the ethno-nationalists on the right have some sort of long-term scope to their project. Something that says that given the necessity, they would sacrifice themselves for something greater than their temporary existence. Most ANCAPs think that the mercury potion of AI will make them live forever. Well, AI bubble is popping right now, so stay tuned for that mess. In reality, we're probably not all that far off from influencers saying that it's good for their skin to bathe yourself in the blood of the innocents, Countess style from Diablo 2. And we must dig deep and course correct wherever possible. That's what I say. Like, even Netanyahu isn't the worst of the worst fighting for supremacy of thought this very day. There are fat freaks like Ben Gvir, who essentially is the Randy Fine of Israeli politics, although he has about 5% lower BMI than that freak. Even the Zionists in both the governments are like, dude, you need to chill. You're making us all look like we enjoy killing children with your posts. You're not even doing that in the field, getting PTSD and injuries. You're posting. So shut the hell up, man. To break up the Israel monotony, there's some fascinating facts that are scientifically reproducible 100% of the time. You know how there's been a fad to eat like raw organs? Liver King, and the whole carnivore diet that almost killed Jordan Peterson when he was on benzos. That's all Tyson Foods propaganda, man. That's all Tyson Foods propaganda. Meat is cool, but the thing is, it's very, very tasty, and a lot of the things that are really good for us aren't that tasty, and a lot of things that are really, really bad for us are extremely tasty. Meat is cool, but the quality of the meat is also entirely dependent on the vegetables that the animals eat. And you must moderate your meat consumption to avoid excess saturated fats that leads to insulin resistance, as well as the bacteria that grows on and around dead meat being the same bacteria that will straight up eat you, which is why you can't leave meat out and consume it without horrible side effects. And don't even get me started on the things they do to those animals in a factory setting that leaves the low-quality meat people consume in, say, fast food rich with poisons and adulterants. That doesn't mean bacteria is all bad, though. Quite the contrary. The bacteria that fermenting fruits and vegetables produce is prized for health throughout history and scientifically proven to enrich your gut biome, which has more cells in it than the human cells in the rest of your body by a factor of about 1 to 10. Actually. It's actually wild how driven your entire existence is by bacteria, for better or for worse. We've actually learned something incredibly fascinating. The appendix has a purpose. It isn't just vestigial. It's actually a refuge for good bacteria. And that's why when your gut biome is particularly bad, it inflames and bursts. I also believe the frequent case for autism is gut biome, the familiar foods myth that autism speaks, the organization propagates, about only eating processed junk because it's tasty and familiar and, oh, that's my particular hyperfixation, is how one stays autistic forever. It's a 7-year commitment to reprogramming and regenerating every cell in your body to be functional. That's exactly why scientists have never found a proven genetic correlation to autism, because it's passed down through diet. All right, y'all. You gotta be mourning Cobes for a while. Rest in peace, King Cobra. Cheers.